Is it possible for one person to create a short animated film in just 1 week? A few weeks ago, I set out to discover the answer to this question when I tried to submit a short film in time for an animation challenge on YouTube. But first of all, if this is your first time watching the channel, then welcome to PULP Anime. This is a channel where I create anime videos by myself and teach you how you can do it too. So as you can understand, I already had some experience in making animated videos in the past. But the problem is that it usually took me about a month to produce a few-minute video. And until now, I actually preferred creating videos this way, with the option to invest a bit more in my projects with a bit less pressure. And about 3 months ago, when I've heard about an animation challenge organized by another YouTuber called The Judgmental Critter, I honestly thought I would have enough time to make a video for the challenge exactly the same way I've been creating until now. But then, unfortunately, my life got a bit complicated, and I had to take a complete break from YouTube for that entire period. And honestly, I totally thought about giving up on participating in the challenge. But then one day, I got a notification about a community post reminding me that there was still a week left to submit the films for the challenge. And then I thought to myself that maybe it's still worth giving it a shot. If it works out, I'll gain the satisfaction of having participated in the challenge despite everything that happened. And if not, at least I can post the video on my channel as a case study. So I embarked on a mission I wasn't entirely sure would be possible: to create a short animated film within just 1 week. And the truth is, what I discovered was a big surprise even for myself. Not only is it possible, but it can actually be relatively easy. Because not only did I finish a day before the deadline, but I also had plenty of time in between to take care of other commitments. So now you're probably asking yourself, how exactly did I do it? The good news is that I'm about to walk you through exactly how I did it, in order to shed some light on my process so you can learn from it and even do it yourself. So if you're ready to begin, let's get started with the video. So first of all, before you can even think about creating an animated film within 1 week, you'll need to find a suitable idea for it. And the name of the game here is to find something that you are excited about and to simplify it as much as possible. After all, if you want to produce a film from start to finish in a week, it has to be pretty short. So if you have an idea for a full-length movie or an entire web series that takes a lot of time to convey, it might not be the best fit. Instead, it's better to think of a short scene or sequence that showcases a unique world, a special character, or an interesting idea you have. In other words, limit yourself as much as possible. In the film that I created, for example, I came up with an idea for an entire adventure series set on the continent of Faerun from Dungeons & Dragons, revolving around a dwarf adventurer and an elf he adopted when she was a child, and their long journey full of exploration of ancient ruins and monster hunting. Which of course, I didn't have time to convey in just 1 minute. So instead, I chose to focus on a short sequence that introduces the characters and their dynamics. So once you'll find a suitable idea that you think you can tell in just a few minutes, it's time to move on to the next stage, which is writing a synopsis. Usually, when creating a film or series, it's common to write a full script for the project to make it easier to communicate the idea with others who will help you to produce it. But of course, if you're working alone and only have 1 week to create an entire animated film by yourself, I recommend skipping the script writing altogether. Instead, you should settle for a short synopsis that will help you solidify your idea into a sequence of events that will guide you while making the rest of your movie. Here's an example of the synopsis I wrote for my short film. And if you're wondering what those words at the beginning of each sentence are, it's basically a writing template that I really like to use to develop my ideas. This template is very popular in Japan and is mainly used for writing anime and manga series. Once you learn it, you'll start noticing it in many Japanese works, whether in single episodes, full-length movies, or even entire arcs of TV and manga series. And this template is called Kishoten Ketsu. And the beauty of it is that it's very flexible and helps you write things in a more interesting way. I recommend reading a bit more about it on Google, but basically, the stages of the story you'll tell using this template are: key, or in other words, introduction. This is essentially an event or situation you want to present at the beginning of your story. Show, which stands for development. It means that things progress in a certain direction based on what you presented in the beginning of your story. 10, which is basically a twist. And it doesn't have to be a plot twist like The Sixth Sense or anything. It can be something that breaks the previous sequence, like a change in location, perspective, or even a time shift like a flashback. And the last part is Ketsu, which is basically the conclusion. In this stage you see how the twist connects to the situation presented in the first 2 stages, and the story can finally be concluded in a satisfying way. The nice thing about Kishoten Ketsu is that it allows you to write stories that don't necessarily revolve around a central conflict, unlike many other writing templates out there. Which makes it a great template if you're interested in writing things like slice of life or comedy. I could honestly talk a lot more about this in an entire video on its own, so let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in, or if there's any other step in this video that you'd like me to cover in more detail in a future video. But now, after you've briefly written down what happens in your film, whether you used a writing template or not, it's time to move on to the next stage, which is creating an animatic. At this stage, you should already have a synopsis ready to go, and you know exactly what will happen in each part of your film. So just before you start animating, it's important to create an unfinished version of your film with the music, audio clips, and temporary images that you'll later replace with the final animations you'll create later. Usually when people are making live-action films or YouTube videos, they typically shoot the footage with the crew and actors, and then edit the film from the footage they've already shot. But what's funny about animation is that this whole process works in reverse. You first edit your film without any of your footage, and only then you can start to get the final shots that you're gonna need. This way, you won't waste time creating animation for scenes that you might later decide to cut during editing, in order to improve the pacing of your film. And this unfinished version of your movie is what people usually refer to as a video board or an animatic. And the cool thing is that I actually found a pretty great method to create the animatic really quickly. So the first step is to actually find music that fits your film. For this, I recommend simply going to YouTube Studio and searching for music there, so you won't have to deal with copyright issues if you're publishing your film on YouTube. Just make sure to check whether the use of a specific track requires you to credit the creator of the track or not. If it does, simply include the credit at the end of your film or in the description of your video. After you're done choosing music tracks for your film, simply drag them into the timeline of your editing software. Now you can start editing placeholder images that will represent the shots you'll need to create later. To create these images, I use a program called Leonardo AI, which is a pretty great image generating software for this particular task, because it gives you a lot of free credits to generate your images, even if you don't have money for their paid plans. But the best thing about Leonardo AI is their function called real-time generation. With this tool, you can describe your shot and see your image being generated in real time, which is really great for storyboarding, because it allows you to experiment with different compositions that you think will help you tell the story without having to wait for long periods of time between each generation. So let me actually show you how it works by recreating the first shot of my movie. I already knew from the get-go that I wanted to start by showing my character Diana looking at the notice board inside the tavern. So I simply described the shot in the text bar down below, and clicked on the random seed button to get different results. And even though it wasn't exactly the composition I had imagined, it was good enough as a placeholder image for me to recognize the shot that I'll need to create later. So after you finish creating all your shots, and editing them together with the music you chose, you'll essentially have a rough cut of your film without the animations. But before you're ready to even start animating, there's one more thing you'll need to take care of, and that's creating your 3D assets. This basically means creating the characters, backgrounds, and props you'll need to tell your story. So let's start with the most important thing, creating the characters. In order to create the characters for my short film, I actually used a free mobile app called Make Avatar. Over there, you can simply create characters and export them as VRM files. After connecting your phone to your computer, you can edit their textures with programs like VRM Texture Replacer, add parts like hats, weapons, or specific body parts with programs like VRM Parts Adder, and then add black outlines to these parts with programs like Blender. At the end of this process, you'll have a character in a VRM file that you can animate with softwares like Animator, DSS, or VRM Posing Desktop. And if you're looking for alternative ways to create characters, I recommend checking out the tutorials I've made in the past on creating characters with VRoid Studio, or on how to convert 3D files to VRM. But something I haven't talked about before is how to create props like weapons, or specific items that the characters will use in your animations. In order to create the weapons for my characters in this film, I simply made them using Leonardo's real-time canvas tool. Then, I exported that image to a 3D image conversion software called Rodin AI, where I turned the image into a 3D item. So now, the last thing I needed to create was the backgrounds, which I actually made using Adobe Firefly. But you can use any other image generator like Leonardo, royalty-free images from Pexels, or capture backgrounds from Gmod or VRChat, as I've done in other videos that I've made before. And no matter which tools you choose to use, once your characters, backgrounds and props are ready, you can finally move on to the most important step, which is creating your animations. But before that, if you're finding this video helpful, you can support this channel by clicking on the like and subscribe button below. So anyway, to create the animations for my short film, I primarily used a software called VRM Posing Desktop, and combined it with a free program called Animator. My process was to import pre-made animations from Mixamo to Animator, then exporting the data to VRM Posing Desktop, capture the animation, edit and tweak certain parts if needed, and then capture the final video from VRM Posing Desktop. And if you want, I've already made an entire video on this process, so I recommend watching it if you're interested. But now, after you've finished animating your shot, you can go back to your animatics timeline, and replace the placeholder image with the animated shot you've just created. Then, just go ahead and continue with this process until you have an almost complete version of your film with the final animations. And even though your video is now fully animated, there are still a few things missing. So the next thing you'll need to add is VFX. Of course, it's not mandatory to add visual effects to your films at this stage, but even adding transitions or camera movements can significantly enhance a shot that might otherwise be quite dull without them. And in general, if you need specific things like magic effects or explosions, this is a good stage to add them and control them separately from your animations. So what I usually like to do is to use softwares that allows you to use various pre-made particle effects, like VRM Posing Desktop or Gmod. Then I usually change the background to black and record the screen with softwares like OBS. And then I can simply import the video file into my editing software and change the blending mode to screen. And now you get an element that can be easily integrated into your scene without any issues. But to really sell any visual effect, or the world you're trying to present to your audience in general, there's one last thing you'll need to add to your film. And this thing is sound effects. If you've never created an animation before, it might look pretty bad when you first watch it. But I would say that at least 50% of the impact of any animation, or of any visual effect for this matter, is the sound that accompanies it. If you don't believe me, just take a look at this shot without any sound effects. And now, look at it with some pretty basic sound effects that I've added. As you can see, just by adding some extra sounds to this shot, I turned this simple effect that I've created from a basic lens flare in Adobe Premiere into something that actually looks quite good. And in order to get good sound effects for my videos, I usually download them from Envato Elements. But I also recommend you to check some free alternatives, like the audio library from YouTube Studio, or visiting a website called freesound.org. But to tell you the truth, this time I've actually tried doing something new in this video, and it was creating sound effects using ElevenLabs. And you probably know them as a text-to-speech service.
Hi, welcome to PULP Anime.
But recently they've also added a new feature to their website that allows you to generate sound effects from text. Over there, you can simply choose the sound effect option, describe the sound you're looking for, and click Generate. If you like the results, you can easily download the sound and use it in your video. And after you'll finish creating your sound effects and adding them to your timeline, all that's left is to render the video, and you're done. So as you can see, my process of making animated videos is pretty straightforward. And by using this method, I've actually succeeded in creating a short film from scratch in less than 1 week of work. So besides being happy that I succeeded in the challenge I set for myself, and ultimately managed to participate in the animation challenge I really wanted, I'm super excited to learn that it's possible to create animated content in such a short amount of time. And it was important for me to make this video so that you can do the same thing too. And by the way, if you're curious to see how my short film turned out, you're welcome to check it out on my channel right now, or on the Judgmental Critters channel along with the other films participating in the competition. See you later!